Alaskan yacht bursts into flames in the middle of the ocean.
He started calling, Chrissy Diane, Chrissy Diane.
A mother and daughter vanish at sea.
I don't know what happened to him.
All clues are buried 500 feet underwater.
We were stuck searching and looking and looking.
There were so many unusual and bizarre twists.
There may be something more sinister involved here.
Southern Alaska. The Coast Guard gets an emergency call from a yachtsman at sea.
Coast Guard Command Center.
Hello, I need to report an accident.
Okay. What happened?
While traveling down the Alaskan coast, yacht dealer Robert Meyer's boat bursts into flames. And now he can't find his wife and daughter.
Your wife and your daughter are gone?
I spent almost an hour circling the boat, and I don't know what happened to him.
While the Coast Guard mobilizes a search and rescue crew, Meyer describes his harrowing ordeal. Meyer, his wife Diana, and their 18-year-old daughter Christine were spending the weekend together at sea on their yacht, the Marjo.
They traveled into Salisbury Sound, where he started to experience some mechanical problems. One of the engines on the boat failed, and then another failed.
Him and his wife and his daughter started seeing smoke inside the boat. Thought it was coming from some wiring in the dash, and then thought maybe it was coming from the engine room.
You reached down and felt the deck above the engine room when it was hot.
As smoke engulfs the yacht, the Meyers realize they must abandon ship. Fortunately, they're pulling a small boat they can use to get away.
He had a 24-foot Carolina skiff, which he was towing up behind the yacht. He pulled that up to the back of his boat and had told his daughter and his wife to throw the belongings into the boat.
They grab their two dogs and attempt to climb in, but the waves are choppy. Boarding becomes treacherous.
When you pull a skiff that close, it comes up over the top of the boarding platform and bangs into the back of the boat.
Then, Meyer says the dogs ran back into the burning boat.
The two women asked him to go back into the boat and retrieve their dogs.
The boat was filled with smoke. We went to search for about 4 or 5 minutes.
Found the dogs all the way forward. Brought them back out to the stern of the boat.
By the time he came back to the skiff, his wife and daughter were missing.
It's a seaman's worst nightmare. Meyer is alone in the middle of the water, 40 miles from civilization.
Said he went all the way back through the boat, climbed up to the top of the boat to look around for better visibility. Didn't see him anywhere, didn't hear any screaming.
He can't find his family. With the yacht's power now cut from the fire, he can't radio for help. The heat and smoke now become unbearable. Meyer jumps into the skiff with his dogs and keeps searching.
He started making circles around the boat, calling Chrissy Diane, and circling outward. Because he thought, well, what if they fell in the water? They could be drifting away.
No signs of his wife or daughter. At this point, the boat was burning like a torch.
He couldn't get within 50 feet of it. It was so hot.
Meyer must head for shore with the dogs to get help. He's only half a mile away from land, but it's uninhabited wilderness. He must now leave his family behind and navigate his way back home to Sitka, an hour away.
Once he got there, he alerted the authorities that an accident occurred.
I spent almost an hour circling the boat, and they're gone.
Okay, now...
And when I left the back deck, I said, you get the skiff, and I'll get the dogs. I don't know what happened to them.
Back home, Meyer calls his business manager and family friend Ann Lowe with the tragic news.
I was asleep. He sounded very distressed. He said, Ann, I got some bad news. And I said, who is this? And he goes, Ann, it's Bob. He goes, I Chrissy and Diane are gone. I said, gone where? He says, they're gone.
The search is on for a mother and daughter whose boat caught fire and sank near Sitka.
His wife, Diana, and his 18-year-old daughter, Christine, were trying to get into a skiff at the stern. When Meyer reached the back of the boat, they were gone.
The Coast Guard is searching for the pair using a cutter and 2 helicopters.
Rescuers set out to save Diana and Christine, but this won't be a typical mission. Some troubling secrets may have gone down with the yacht.
The Coast Guard is looking for a mother and daughter whose boat sank near Sitka. Meyer put the 2 women in a skiff to escape, then returned to the boat himself to rescue the family dogs. When he got back to the skiff, he found it empty.
The town of Sitka is devastated at the news. Bob and Diana Meyer own the most popular boating store in the region. Diana works with the local PTA. Chrissy just graduated from high school.
Bob was pacing back and forth. Tears were running down his face. His face was all sooty. He smelled like fire to me. He smelled like smoke.
Time is running out, especially if Diana and Chrissy are fighting to survive in 45-degree water without life vests.
An hour to 2 hours, and more than likely, probably within an hour, you'd be unconscious. So without flotation, you wouldn't stay afloat on the water.
The Coast Guard is determined to find them, but it's a tough mission.
Because we have such a large jurisdiction, we have to respond both by boat and by helo.
They're doing sweeps back and forth, and they're flying a line pattern. Basically, they go up, and then they might go right, sweep back, eighth of a mile.
There's no sign of the missing women. But the Coast Guard finds Meyer's yacht, the Marjo, engulfed in flames. Just moments later, the Marjo starts to sink. If Diana and Christine were on the yacht, their bodies may now be trapped as the burning wreckage plunges underwater. The Coast Guard is quickly running out of options. Investigators send a police scuba team to assess the scene.
Divers from the Sitka search and rescue team had gone out and quickly determined that the depths where the boat was at was beyond their capacity to work in.
Divers coming up.
The remains of the Marjo now lie at the bottom of the ocean, 500 feet down.
A depth of 500 feet for scuba divers is far too deep to attempt and can't be done. Their limiting depth was about 100 feet, and it really depended on the area that we were going into.
That's very deep water, and it's cold and dark. It would be impossible, minus a major research ship coming in with a submarine, to go down that deep.
Yet back on land, there's still a glimmer of hope. Sitka's Volunteer Search and Rescue Corps has set out to scour the island's rugged terrain.
One of the potential possibilities that we're always focused in on is, did the person make it to shore, and are they on shore or right up inside the trees, trying to seek shelter?
The yacht went down only half a mile from an uninhabited shoreline.
We had the boats deployed. We had searchers on the shore walking every piece of that beach. We're hollering their names or whistling.
We look for brush that's pushed down, vegetation along the shoreline, as well as look into holes and places where a person might hide for shelter.
We're looking for tracks in the sand. If someone comes out of the water, they're going to leave a trail behind them.
Yeah, let's go ahead and pick that candy wrapper up. And,
We try to use all of our senses, looking for another angle, something that can give us a clue.
But few clues emerge. They hunt for even the smallest bit of evidence.
You're always going to find garbage, just lots of debris. But one of the things that we had to do is determine, was it something that came off the Marjo or not?
Finally, a half-mile from the fire, the team finds something.
We found a fuel jug floating in the water around the Sinitsin Cove area. It was near the shore, drifting with the tide.
Then, searchers find a second fuel can nearby.
Turned that in as evidence. We were pretty certain that the fuel jug had come off the Marjo.
But with no life signs of the women, rescuers realized that they may be looking for bodies.
We had our search dog up there. If a body's underwater, it's still giving off gases, bubbles, things like that. And as that comes up to the surface, the dog is trained to pick up on that scent.
Well, in other news tonight, no sign of 2 women missing from a burning boat north of Sitka.
It was all about where are they, hope, and a lot of prayers that they were okay.
A 300-square-mile search ensued. No clues have been found as to the location of the 2 women.
After 2 days, rescuers make a grim decision. They call off the search.
You want to bring their loved ones home, but it's a tough call. You got to make that call and suspend the mission.
We just all looked at each other because we didn't know what to do exactly. We were sort of like overwhelmed about what to do.
Rescuers are convinced Diana and Chrissy must have drowned.
Maybe when they were trying to get on that skiff, they'd banged into the back of the boat. It might have knocked them over.
The chances of finding someone underwater isn't real likely. We got very deep water around here.
But just as the search comes to an end, a new lead surfaces.
We've got a problem. There may be something more sinister involved here.
And the Coast Guard suspended a 2-day search today for a mother and daughter who were trying to escape their burning boat in waters near Sitka.
Bob related to me that it was the last weekend his daughter had in town before she was taken off to go to college to pursue a music degree. She had told him how great of a father he was, and he accounted that it was the best weekend he'd ever had.
His demeanor was like, why didn't I die with him? Why couldn't it have been me?
But investigators now start to see another side of Robert Meyer.
When I was talking to Bob, he was very calm, matter of fact. He was laying in the bed, twiddling his thumbs. I asked Bob if it was okay if I talked to him. He said, sure. And then he gave me an account of what happened.
When we told him we were going to go out and search, he stated, well, I know you have to, but, I realize you're not going to find anything. That was sort of odd coming from a family member. I've never heard that before.
He had half a dozen people working for him. He had many boats that he could have used on the search effort, but he did not enhance the search effort in any way.
Didn't display the normal signs that you see from somebody that's just experienced the loss of a family member, let alone more than one member in his family.
Investigators decide to question his business manager and friend, Ann Lowe, who's been taking care of Bob since the fire. At her home, she unknowingly offers a clue.
The officer came in and says, what is that? I said, oh, it's Bob's clothes. They stink to high heaven, and I got to get them off of my clothes, and they're smelling up my house.
His blue jeans, his red flannel shirt, and his other items all reeked of diesel. I told her to hold off and not to wash the clothes.
Detectives would expect his clothes to smell like smoke, not like fresh fuel. Suspicion mounts when they remember the evidence searchers turned up after the yacht went down.
There were 2 gas cans that were found floating in the water where the Marjo sunk. And one of them we were able to determine had been full of diesel.
Investigators are eager to test Meyer's clothing for diesel fuel, but they hit a snag. When they go to Ann's house, her daughter is in the middle of doing the laundry.
When I went back to the residence to seize the clothes, Melanie walked me over to the washroom and said, oh, they've already been washed once and they're going through a second cycle.
Police immediately seize the wet clothes. And while questioning Ann, they make a startling discovery.
He didn't call the Coast Guard immediately and report that his boat was on fire and that his wife and his daughter were missing. He called Ann Lowe.
She said basically she had to talk him into calling the Coast Guard.
And I said, have you called the Coast Guard? He said, it won't do any good to call the Coast Guard. They're gone.
She had to convince him to make the report.
I said, we still need to call the Coast Guard and get a search and rescue going. He says, I have searched and searched, they're gone. And I said, no, you need to call the Coast Guard.
Then detectives find a contradiction in Meyer's story. He first told police that he couldn't radio for help until he got to shore. The fire had cut his power. Yet Meyer had a chance to summon help much sooner than he had claimed. Investigators learned that as he raced back to shore, he passed another boat.
He said he did pass a trawler by Dog Point. He made no attempt to go over and get a hold of them to hail the Coast Guard, which is pretty much the standard procedure if you do have problems.
As they investigate further, detectives find a discrepancy in Meyer's timeline. He says his family headed home from their weekend trip about 9 p.m.
And I asked him how long it would take to get back to Salisbury Sound at the speed he was running, and he said that it'd take about 3 hours.
Meaning he would have arrived home just after midnight. But Meyer was at sea for more than 5 hours.
He said he didn't notice any problems till 2 a.m. So from 9 p.m. to 2 a.m. is 5 hours. There's 2 extra hours that's unaccounted for.
And investigators find other flaws in Meyer's story.
He said that he went back in looking for the 2 dogs on board. And he claimed at that point that the boat was pretty much full of fumes. The medical examiner said that he wouldn't have survived going through, that he would have died because of fumes if it was as he explained.
Detectives suspect Meyer may have killed his wife and daughter. But why?
We had minuscule amount of physical evidence, no witnesses, and just a bad story from Bob Meyer to go on initially.
I think Mr. Myers thought not necessarily that nobody would suspect what he's done, but nobody would be able to prove what he has done.
Robert Meyer and his wife and daughter were in a boat about 35 miles north of Sitka when the vessel caught fire.
Chrissy said, Daddy, don't leave my dogs behind. Don't let my dogs die. He said because she hadn't called him Daddy in years like that, he couldn't leave those dogs behind.
Now, detectives start to suspect Meyer may have torched his 50-foot yacht as a cover-up for murder.
We knew something was there. We felt that the story Meyer had given us wasn't true and that 2 people had died, and we were determined to find the truth.
Then detectives uncover a new lead. A fisherman contacts police and says he was in a commercial fishing zone offshore the evening before the fire. He saw Meyer a quarter-mile away, heading up the fishing route to deeper water.
He saw Meyer's boat, and he was just very perplexed as to why he was out there in a pleasure boat for no apparent reason. That looked just very suspicious.
Passenger boats don't usually take this outside passage because there is a calmer waterway along the shore.
It's shelter. You don't have to worry about the weather affecting you too much there. It's the way everybody goes north on a boat.
So why would Meyer take the rough route? As investigators' suspicions rise, Bob Meyer's friends still don't believe he would hurt his family.
Him and Diane and Chrissy were a tight little family. Bob loved his wife. I can remember one time we were in the office talking, and Bob bopped around the corner, and he saw her sitting there, and he goes, "Look at my bride. She looks just like she did when I first met her."
But some relationships are not all that they seem.
We gathered evidence that Diana Meyer was aware that Bob was having an affair, and she was planning on leaving him.
Mrs. Meyer was telling people, I think my husband's having an affair. I'm getting out of here. I'm going to go to Montana with my daughter when she goes to school.
She was going to divorce him, take her half of the business and their personal property, and leave.
When detectives uncover the identity of Meyer's mistress, they are shocked to learn she is none other than his business manager, Ann Lowe.
We had a witness. One of Ann's sons actually saw them together on the boat before the incident happened, saw them kissing one another, so his observations confirmed that they had more than a business relationship.
Investigators learned that Meyer had a lot to lose in a divorce. He and Diana were partners in their very profitable yacht dealership.
She would own 51% of the business. It had the potential to be a very messy divorce situation.
Going to be a big fight over that asset, and she was the majority shareholder.
Certainly that's a motive. Certainly another woman involved is another motive to kill somebody.
But there's more. Investigators learn Meyer has 2 life insurance policies on his wife and daughter, totaling $1 million, plus yacht insurance for another $250,000.
This way he came out $1 million ahead and kept the business.
Detectives are now convinced that Meyer killed his wife and daughter. They've established motive, but they don't have any physical evidence to prove it.
He obviously took some steps to cover his tracks, to dispose of evidence. I'm sure he hoped that we would believe that this was just an unfortunate boating accident.
I think that he killed them the day before the barjo was sunk. He took that outside passage so the people that he knew in the boating community around Sitka wouldn't be stopping or trying to communicate with them, and then he would have to explain where his wife and his daughter was.
Investigators theorize that Meyer drove out to the middle of Salisbury Sound to stage the fire.
I don't believe it's a coincidence that the boat sank in 500 feet of water. I believe that Bob picked the very deepest spot in that body of water to park his boat over it before he burned the boat.
With the electronics and stuff that he had on his boat, he would have been able to easily map out exactly where you're at and how deep it was.
You're out in the open ocean, the water's very deep. A few miles offshore, you're into, hundreds of fathoms of water. Good place to get rid of something.
Since they can't get to the Marjo, detectives hope that Meyer left some trace evidence behind on the boat he used to escape the flames. Then, while searching the skiff, police find a .44 Magnum shell.
It's not, in and of itself, out of the ordinary to see bullet casings and ammunition on a boat. Several people told us he routinely carried a handgun. Being in Alaska, a lot of people have guns. A lot of people carry guns on their boats.
But that's not all. Police also discover what looks like blood.
It wasn't a very big amount. It was pretty small. It looked like possibly some kind of transfer pattern. It was difficult to tell. Of course, it's not uncommon to see blood on boats because people fish so much, and it's normally fish blood. But we were quickly able to do a species test on it and determine it was human.
I asked him if he received any injuries. I could see he had some scratches on his forearms, and he said he couldn't see the scratches, but said they were probably from holding the family dogs. Also, he said that he had a scrape on his left shin, and he showed that to us.
Investigators send the blood to the lab.
We analyzed it and eventually were able to tell that it came from Diana Meyer.
But a single drop of blood doesn't prove murder. While searching for more clues, investigators find some strange cracks in the front of the skiff.
The skiff had to slam into something hard with the motor running to crack the side so badly. It wouldn't have happened just dinging against the side of the boat as the wind. It had to be from hitting it hard.
But what does it mean?
We thought that perhaps he might have used the skiff to push the Marjo out in deeper water. And that's how the corners of the skiff got damaged, banging up against the side of the Marjo.
Pieces of the puzzle now start coming together. Yet prosecutors don't believe they have enough evidence to convince a jury of murder, even with the discovery of Diana's blood.
I think they'd look at it and they say, what else do you have? What else can you show me? Because this is a fishing boat. People go fishing. People cut themselves.
Investigators see only one way to find out whether Robert Meyer killed his family.
Our hope all along was that we would maybe find some human remains and that maybe they'd be visible there in the wreck.
But getting to the sunken yacht seems impossible.
We have quite a few boats around this area, much shallower than that we know to have people in them still, but we don't recover them because they're out of reach.
Normally when something's beyond the depth of scuba divers, it's kind of like, oh well, you know, it's gone, the sea's got it.
Yet police will stop at nothing to salvage this case, even if it means calling on some of the world's most sophisticated undersea explorers for help.
I don't think there's ever been as an intensive investigation underwater in the state.
I was just doing my job, and my job is to find the truth.
To find it, detectives will go to any extreme. A luxury yacht that sank off the Alaskan coast may hold the only evidence tying Robert Meyer to the murders of his wife and daughter, but detectives can't get to it.
I wanted to solve this case, and you go where the evidence is. We knew that there should be evidence on the boat. Just what was unique about the circumstance, it was under 500 feet of water.
Police don't have the means to dive 500 feet, but they know someone who does. A private underwater research company in southern Alaska may have the right technology to get to the Marjo. It's an underwater robot that can scour the ocean floor.
It's very expensive to get any craft to go down that deep. Investigations don't work there easily.
Investigators anchor up over the site where the Marjo sank. Deep-sea explorers dispatch the million-dollar robot, called a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV. The machine propels itself hundreds of feet below the surface. Oceanographers use remote control to guide the robot and videotape the ocean floor. The ROV scours the water, looking for the Marjo.
We weren't able to find much. Bits and pieces of the wreckage, but not the actual wreck itself.
After a full day, the team finds only some bits of charred wood that may belong to the Marjo. The ocean floor is too murky and uneven to find the yacht using remote control. Another dead end.
We were stuck with pursuing the only leads we had, which were the physical ones, trying to find the wreck, trying to find the bodies, searching, and looking and looking.
Investigators refuse to let the case go cold. They need a larger craft to explore the ocean's depths, but it will really mean pulling some strings.
The Fish and Wildlife trooper in Sitka heard that a submarine was going to be in the area doing some scientific research.
It's just unheard of that that resource would be available for this type of an investigation.
We were able to get a hold of them and ask them if they had a day for us. And they were able to do that.
Investigators descend 500 feet below the surface to hunt for the Marjo. Detectives can go as deep as they want and scour every foot of the ocean floor with the $3 million submarine.
We're in the submarine. We're on the bottom, and it was very mucky on the bottom, and every time you moved, it stirred up the muck.
4 hours pass as they search through seaweed and mud.
Hey, what is this? Is this looking good right here, right now?
The pilot of the submarine, he's telling me the story about how he doesn't want to crash into the wreck of the Marjo and how scared they all were and everything, and I was telling him, you know, I don't think it's a real good time to be telling me this story. So we sat there and waited for the muck to clear, and all of a sudden we looked out the porthole, and there it was. It was maybe 10 yards from us.
Suddenly, they see the remains of a boat.
You could see the name, the Marjo, Sitka, Alaska, on it.
Finally, the team has found what's left of Meyer's 50-foot yacht.
I was just elated that we had found it because we had searched so many times and come up empty-handed.
The boat's entire upper floor is gone, but the bottom floor is relatively intact.
You could see both engines, and it looks like this is the least damaged part of the boat. Everything else was gone. The superstructure was gone. You know, the cabins, the upper decks, everything else was gone or just a pile of wreckage. But here's the engines looking relatively intact, exactly where you would expect them to be.
Finding the engines may offer a huge clue. Meyer had claimed that the fire began in the engine room. Underwater, the engines don't appear to be burned. But to prove murder, investigators need something they can bring to court.
We can take all the pictures we want, but until you physically handle something, analyze it, look at it, you can't tell for certain. So once we knew where it was, it now became our mission to pull it up.
Experts know hauling it up won't be easy. It's never been done before. And that's not their only challenge. Winter is about to set in, making underwater excavation impossible. Detectives spend the entire winter trying to find someone who can help them raise the Marjo. Spring approaches, and in an unprecedented move, Alaskan troopers contact the Navy's Underwater Warfare Center near Seattle for help.
We had to do a lot of getting permission from lots and lots of folks for my organization and the state and the Navy, but eventually they agreed to help us.
Armed with a salvage ship and underwater sonar, police set out to raise the Marjo from the deep.
Our ultimate goal was to raise the wreck so that arson investigators could conclusively tell if the boat had caught fire through a mechanical means or it was an arson. And we also thought there was a possibility that human remains might have been on the boat as well. We just didn't know for certain. We went out over the site, anchored up over it, and started to try and lift it up.
The crew drops a computerized salvage crane more than 500 feet beneath the surface. They plan to raise the entire boat. The Marjo has been underwater for nearly a year, so it will be waterlogged and fragile. Investigators fear they could destroy any evidence trying to lift it. They work carefully for 2 hours, but it doesn't work.
Once they started around trying to grab something hard on the boat to pull it up, it was, I kind of likened it trying to pick up a stick of warm butter with your thumb and forefinger. There's nothing hard to grab onto. Anytime they would latch onto something and pull, it would just come away from the wreck.
To make matters worse, high winds threatened to close down the operation altogether.
We got 36 miles.
Now on the verge of failure, investigators decide to pull up parts of the Marjo, piece by piece.
We were able to pull up both engines and cabling that was attached to them.
After 3 hours, the team raises the boat's 2 engines, a bed, and part of the back deck steps. Investigators take the evidence to be examined.
Mr. Meyer's claim was that the fire on board the boat started in the very bottom of the boat where the engines were under the deck. Immediately above that was a daybed that we were able to salvage, and so if the fire would have come up from the engines to where the daybed was, that would have been one of the hottest spots on board the boat.
But the bed, like the engines, is hardly burned.
Mr. Meyer was saying that there was a fire in the engine compartment on board.
We looked over the engines very closely. The springs, the linkages, the cables, stuff that would have been consumed by the fire were still there. They were still present.
Investigators conclude the fire could not have started on the bottom floor, as Meyer claimed.
We could see from the wreckage the engine room was the least damaged part of the boat. It appeared the fire burned from the top down, not from the engine room up.
Police are finally ready to charge Robert Meyer with double murder in the first degree.
I wanted to see the case closed and see him brought to justice. But sometimes the world has different plans.
Before his arrest, Robert Meyer disappears. As investigators in Sitka, Alaska, make final plans to arrest Robert Meyer for killing his wife and daughter, the suspect takes off.
His lawyer had told him that he thought they were going to arrest him soon. So he planned a trip, and he had a Corvette in storage, and he got that out.
But Meyer doesn't stay out of trouble for long. Police find him in Seattle, where something terrible has happened.
It appeared that Meyer was driving his sports car and was racing with the guy on the motorcycle and lost control, went into the other lane and collided with an oncoming vehicle.
Meyer survives, but he's paralyzed from the neck down. He must remain hospitalized in Seattle for months.
When I got there, he was in pretty serious shape. He was pretty swollen, hard to recognize. He had a thing down his throat for breathing. And they said, well, it looks like he might be able to breathe on his own.
While in the hospital, Meyer and Lowe decide to marry. Investigators think it is a ploy.
Under Alaska law, spouses can't be compelled to testify against one another. So potentially, if she was a witness against him, she couldn't be forced to testify against him.
Detectives suspect that Lowe intentionally washed Meyer's clothes to destroy any evidence that he set his yacht on fire.
She was specifically ordered by a police officer, don't wash these, and then she immediately washed them several times, attempted to get the diesel fuel out of them. Whether she knew beforehand what was going to happen, whether she's an accessory after the fact, I don't know, and we never developed any evidence to prove or disprove that.
I was told that I might be looking at charges myself, and I thought, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not going to worry about it. Well, I should have.
After 6 months in the hospital, Meyer and his fiancée returned to Sitka.
He says his wife and daughter disappeared. A grand jury says he murdered them. 2 first-degree murder indictments handed down today against Sitka businessman Robert Meyer.
Finally, police charge Meyer with murder and Lowe with tampering with evidence.
I was told by some of the officers that come to get us that when they arrested us and put me in the back car, that as soon as I got in that back car and was arrested, that I would break down crying and confess everything. Didn't happen. There was nothing to confess.
With the trial fast approaching, detectives sew together Meyer's sinister plot.
I'm convinced that he killed his wife and daughter and then torched his boat to cover it up.
I think that he killed them the day before the barge was sunk.
I think Bob, for financial reasons, needed to get Christy and his wife out of his estate. The marriage was breaking up. Christy was going off to college, and he would lose control of the business.
Detectives believe Chrissy may have accidentally witnessed her mother's murder. This may have prompted Meyer to also kill her to cover his tracks. Newly married, Meyer and Lowe are free on bail until their trial.
I was looking forward to the trial. I was confident that we were going to convict him.
But it's not so simple. Just before the trial, Meyer disappears for the second time.
We knew he had been missing for about 4 hours and that he was restricted to a wheelchair. So there was only a few places that he could go that had wheelchair access.
Sitka's elite search and rescue team scours nearby streets, docks, and trails.
He was last seen leaving his place of business, which is right across from the ferry terminal.
Police fear Meyer may try to get off the island and flee the state. They must stop the ferry before it leaves. But he is nowhere to be found. Meanwhile, another search team scours a trail in a nearby forest where he sometimes goes.
We looked for tire tracks. We directed our search efforts to areas where the wheelchair could go. And we looked for tire tracks in those areas. We suspected that we would find Bob had driven off the trail inadvertently and in a hole stuck. Maybe tipped upside down, maybe right side up, but just unable to get his wheelchair back on the trail.
Nearly 2 hours later, investigators find possible wheelchair tracks at a dock a quarter mile from Meyer's shop. Rescuers call in Sitka's elite police scuba squad to search the ocean waters off the dock.
I believe that we're going to end up... We moved operations to Sampson Tug and Barge. And on that dock, there's only 2 locations that a wheelchair could have gone over. So we deployed 4 divers.
Divers find no sight of Meyer at the first location. The scuba squad moves to another dock nearby.
When we deployed our divers, right after we pretty much stuck our head under the water, you could see what appeared to be a white glow all the way down at the bottom. About 5 to 10 feet deeper, it was obvious we had found our target.
80 feet below the surface, the dive team finds Meyer still sitting in his wheelchair. His death is ruled a suicide. Two months later, his new wife, Ann Lowe, is found guilty of 1 felony count of tampering with evidence. She is sentenced to 1 year in jail.
I just sat there and I thought, this is American justice? What happened? What in the world happened?
Lowe served 4 months in prison. Today, she still lives in Sitka.
I've not seen a more tenacious kind of investigation, and I don't think that most police officers would have used the imagination that Randy McFerrin used in gaining resources that we normally wouldn't have.
The Sitka Police Department did an excellent job with their initial investigation and then the follow-up that came.
Without the tireless work of investigators, Bob Meyer may have gotten away with murder.
We didn't get that opportunity to try him. I was disappointed that we weren't going to go that step, but at the same time, maybe in a strange way, justice has been served.